Hey everybody, and welcome back to Page to Page. Colin here, and this is part two of my video of my book haul from the Chapel Hill Public Library book sale. The Friends of the Chapel Hill Public Library, they are doing the first book sale since the pandemic started, so I went by on both days. I covered Sunday in my last video, and now I'm going to be covering Saturday. So Saturday was a pretty standard book sale. Basically $3 for hardcover, $2 for paperback. And there was a pretty good selection when I went. 3 different rooms, absolutely full of books. So I got a nice little collection of books, 8 books to be exact. 4 fiction and 4 nonfiction. So let's get right into it. First up, we have The First World War by John Keegan. So John Keegan is a very well-respected military historian. He's written tons of books on military, how it operates. He's covered multiple wars. The First World War, of course. He did the Second World War and the Civil War, which I have all 3 of those. He also did more general military histories and explaining command, operations, stuff like that. I believe he also did something on Korea or Vietnam. But, yeah, so let's read a little bit about the book. The First World War, a cataclysm that left 10 million dead, created the modern world. It was a struggle of unprecedented ferocity that ended the rational liberal culture that had prevailed in Europe since the Enlightenment, swept away the great European empires, and unleashed the demons. Mechanized warfare, mass death, totalitarian politics that have made the 20th century the bloodiest in history. In this magisterial narrative, the great military historian John Keegan has produced the definitive account of the Great War. He sheds fascinating light on weaponry and technology, shows us the doomed negotiations between the monarchs and ministers of 1914, takes us into the verminous trenches of the Western Front, to council rooms of Hague, Hindenburg, and Joffre, to key conflagrations from Gallipoli to East Africa to the Carpathians. This epic account of conflict that still profoundly informs the politics and culture of the world today is destined to take its place among the classics of world history. So yeah, I'm not very well read at all on World War I. I tend to have focused on World War II more in the past, so I felt like I needed to read more about that, and it would also complement a book I actually got later during the book haul, which was also about World War I. So yeah, it's from what I've heard, a great 1-volume account of the war. It's kind of hard to summarize an entire war in 1 volume, but that's what John Keegan tries to do. He at least hits the big battles and big conflicts. And Tom Clancy, who's one of my favorite fiction authors, he even recommends John Keegan as a military historian. So, like I said, I have 3 of his books. This one, the Second World War, and then the Civil War book he wrote. I haven't read any of them yet, but I have a feeling that I'm definitely going to enjoy his writing and his approach to military history. I mean, if Tom Clancy recommends him, I'm into Tom Clancy, so I'm definitely going to be checking it out. Now, this is probably one of the more interesting finds of the day. It might be a controversial book because it is written by a Nazi general, but it was too cool and unique to pass up. So this is Attacks by Field Marshal Irwin Rommel. Attacks is, from my understanding, almost like a journal that he had written during his service for Germany in the First World War. He writes about some of his tactics, his experience, and his plans and all of this throughout World War I. It includes a ton of maps that he had drawn by hand. So it's a really interesting insight into Rommel's tactics, how he developed throughout the First World War, because he's recognized as a great general for his actions in North Africa and him setting up the defenses in Normandy, for instance, in World War II. You don't hear a lot about his actions in World War I, but they are noteworthy. In fact, this is, I can't remember the name, but it's the equivalent of the German Medal of Honor, which is on the cover, that he won due to his actions in World War I. So he definitely played a big part in it, and it was instrumental in his military development. So I thought this would be fascinating. In fact, if I'm not wrong, I believe the Allies printed this in 1944, and it was widely read to kind of give them an insight into his tactics and how he handles things, to make his maneuvers a bit more predictable. So let's see. Let's read a little bit about this. Attacks is Irwin Rommel's personal story of his World War I experiences. It is a rare account of the early combat exploits of one of history's legendary soldiers. First published in 1937, it launched Rommel on the road to fame. Hitler read it and was so impressed that he had Rommel assigned to his personal staff and later gave him a command of the Armored Division in France and then the Africa Corps. George General Patton was electrified by the book and read it many times. Not fiction, not theory. It is the story of Rommel's development from a green lieutenant into a confident and seasoned combat commander. It is a book of action and valor. From his first patrol to that almost unbelievable series of combat actions for which he was awarded Germany's highest decoration for valor, Rommel describes in detail his exploits and those of the men under his command. Unlike many other young soldiers on both sides of the conflict, Rommel did not spend the war in the trenches of France. He was there, but he also participated in the mobile campaigns in Romania, Austria, and Italy as a company and detachment commander in an elite mountain battalion. Often operating independently with great initiative, he was able to achieve startling battlefield successes. The tactics he used in France and Africa in World War II were developed in Romania and Italy in World War I. This book provides amazing insight into the mind and character of this great warrior. Rommel, the lieutenant, displayed the same battlefield brilliance, leadership, and chivalry that Rommel, the field marshal, displayed some 23 years later. After reading Attacks, it is easy to understand how Rommel became one of the most famous combat generals of all time. So that definitely sounds very intriguing. Studying the Third Reich is very fascinating to me. It's interesting how the people of Germany, who seemed to be a very educated society, had basically let some very crazy, almost maniacal, I guess totally maniacal people take control of the country with such extreme ideas. And like a lot of the people in the Nazi Empire, they were absolutely insane. Like Rommel, I read recently, was like obsessed with mines. Like he thought that they were just the purest form of defense. He was obsessed with the thought of mines as a form of defense. So it'll be interesting to get inside his mind. I have William Scherer's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich on my shelf, so I need to get around to reading that eventually. But I haven't read as much about the European theater as I have the Pacific theater, actually. So I do definitely want to read this and get an insight into who's considered one of the great generals of World War II, inside of his mind and his thoughts. So I'm from the South, and in the South, this next guy, I have a biography of this guy, and he's not very well respected in the South. He's not liked. He's considered a butcher where I come from by many people. So this is definitely going to be a controversial biography, especially for Southerners. It's Sherman, A Soldier's Passion for Order by John F. Marcelek. So here it is. Here's the cover. Pretty cool cover. Iconic picture of him on his horse. Let's read the inside cover. Among the towering figures of the Civil War, none is more enigmatic than General William Tecumseh Sherman. Widely denounced as fiendishly destructive and even insane for his infamous march to the sea across Georgia, Sherman was a brilliant commander and strategist who helped bring the bloody war to a swifter and surer end. Yet he left a legacy of total war against the unarmed civilians and their property, which has haunted the military leaders and all Americans up to the present day. Now, in this definitive biography, the nature and motives of this legendary and controversial military genius are at last explored. So I generally tend to read more books on the Confederacy when I study the Civil War history. I'm from the South, and I've found a couple of ancestors I had that fought for the Confederacy. So it's just, I guess, it relates more to me as a Southerner and as someone whose family and ancestors lived in the South. And I also I find a lot of the leaders of the Confederacy to be very fascinating. From the religious, deeply devout Protestant Stonewall Jackson to the calm yet stern and brilliant General Lee. There's just so many crazy figures in there, and even the incompetent leaders like Braxton Bragg, Earl Van Dorn, all of those guys, even the ones that were considered complete failures, are fun to comprehend or fun to learn about and understand. But I'm trying to get a few more books on the Union, so I figured this would be a great read about someone who I used to not like. Growing up in the South, you don't really like Sherman. He burned the South. His men under him pillaged, but I believe this book explains that he actually loved the South. He was big into the South. He lived in Louisiana before the war started, and I believe he was the first president of LSU. So he didn't hate the South. He didn't want to burn it to the ground and completely erase everything in the South, but he just did what he thought was necessary to keep the Union together. And this book is actually written by a Southerner, someone from Mississippi, so it'll be interesting to see that take on it. This book, it's a little bit torn up, but it's still holding together, so I'm glad I picked this one up. You got a nice map of Sherman's march in the front. So yeah, I can't wait to read about General Sherman. One of my favorite fiction writers of all time is Vladimir Nabokov. I can't think of any author really that I like more than him. I think he's got the best prose of any writer of all time, my personal opinion. I don't think anyone could write as beautifully as he could, and it's even more amazing to me because English was not his first language. He was Russian, of course, and he learned Russian and French while in Russia, I believe. So the fact that he didn't even grow up speaking English, or it wasn't his first language that he learned, it's incredible how well he writes and what a firm grasp on the English language he has. So that being said, the next book I got, and the final nonfiction book, is this collection of his letters titled Vladimir Nabokov, Selected Letters 1940 to 1977, edited by Dmitry Nabokov, which is his son, and Matthew J. Broccoli. I'm always getting Nabokov books. Anything I see with his name on it I don't have, I would like to get it to expand my collection. And I figured that it would be really important in my development of understanding him to go through a few of his letters that had been compiled. And it's really extensive as well. I mean, it's got a ton of letters in here and a few pictures as well. It says it's got 12 pages of photographs on the back of it. So let's read a bit about it. Vladimir Nabokov's rise from impoverished World War II refugee to literary giant is vividly documented in this volume of more than 400 letters. Although he had published a substantial body of emigre work in Russian, Nabokov was virtually unknown in America on his arrival in 1940. It wasn't until 1958, with the U.S. publication of Lolita, that he was able to devote himself full-time to his later masterpieces, including Pale Fire and Ada. The letters trace his struggles with publishers and editors to preserve his artistic integrity and to achieve a readership from his work and constitute a repository for the master's convictions about literature, other writers, artistic and personal freedom. The book crackles with Nabokov's intelligence and wit, whether applied to exaltations of true art, denunciations of false art, or even the composition of an unsolicited jingle for a shaving cream company, which declined his effort. I've already read a few of the letters in this book, just flipping through it, and they've been really captivating. I mean, you've got him writing about to the administrators at Cornell where he taught. For some reason, he was like completely opposed to having lectures before 11 a.m. In all of his letters, he's just like, please don't schedule my classes for before 11 a.m. So I know he had insomnia, so maybe that contributed to him not wanting classes that early and more in the afternoon, but still very interesting. There's also a ton of letters to Stanley Kubrick, the popular movie director, who was an incredible director, who actually took on his Lolita to adapt it into a movie, which Nabokov helped with the script tremendously. He has a few opinions on authors. He has a few funny opinions on translations, and his just searing wit just comes right out when you read his letters. And he's also a very harsh critic. Some people don't like him as a literary critic as much because he really tore some famous authors down. But even if I don't agree with his personal opinions on some figures, like he hated Faulkner, and Faulkner is one of my favorite novelists as well. So I don't agree with him on some of his criticism, but even if I don't, it's still usually interesting to read because of how passionate he is and how firm he is in his opinions. So that's Nabokov's Collected Letters. So we're moving on to the fiction books now. I got 4 fiction books to close out the video with. And up next is a short story collection. It is Cathedral by Raymond Carver. So I was very excited to find this copy. I love the cover, by the way. It looks really cool. I mean, it kind of, I guess, fits Carver's aesthetic. But yeah, there's Raymond Carver. He was considered one of the foremost short story writers in American literature. I have only read one of Carver's short stories, which actually is the title of this one, Cathedral. I read it in a literature class I was taking at community college when I was transferring colleges. I go to Kennesaw State University now, so while I was transferring there, I took some courses at community college that would go towards my degree, and one of them was a literature class. And in the literature class, we read Cathedral, and I thought it was amazing. And in that literature class, I really started to love reading and writing. So that's kind of where I got introduced to some great writers and started to love books and started to want to collect books. So I'm definitely excited about getting back to this author whose story I really loved. It's a little bit late for that, but I just happened to find it, so I thought I might pick it up and give it a try. I believe there are 12 stories in this book, or 12 short stories in this collection. Yeah, so the stories included are Feathers, Chef's House, Preservation, The Compartment, A Small Good Thing, Vitamins, Careful, Where I'm Calling From, The Train, Fever, The Bridal, and Cathedral. So those are the stories included in this slim volume. I am very excited to dig into this one. I've heard a lot of great things about Carver, and I do remember loving Cathedral. Cathedral, it's a very straightforward type story. It's just a man and his wife are living together, and the wife's old blind friend is trying to reacquaint with her and just connect with her, and he ends up going to their house, and the narrator or protagonist really doesn't like this man because he's a bit cozy with his wife, and then he starts hating him for his blindness. But throughout the story, the protagonist and the blind man, they start to bond, and it's just a really straightforward story. I mean, absolutely seeped with symbolism, which I think that's what Carver was doing. Making a point or drawing symbols out of just ordinary stories. So yeah, that's Cathedral by Raymond Carver. Next up, we have an author that I have heard a lot about, and I've been meaning to read for quite some time. I've seen his books in a ton of stores, and I thought, you know what, I finally need to get a copy of one of his novels and see what all the hype is about. So this is The Prague Cemetery by Umberto Eco. Umberto Eco was an Italian novelist. He was also a medievalist. He studied a lot of things about language, and he was also an expert on semiotics, which is the interpretation of symbols. A very well-acclaimed novelist, very influential, very famous in the literature community, recognized as one of the premier novelists of Italy, especially during the 20th century. So I figured it was about time to give this one a read. He has more famous works. The Name of the Rose is one I've heard about a lot, and Foucault's Pendulum, which if I enjoy this novel, I'm definitely going to have to pick that up. So let's read a bit from the inside cover. 19th century Europe, from Turin to Prague to Paris, abounds with the ghastly and mysterious. Jesuits plot against Freemasons. Italian Republicans strangle priests with their own intestines. French criminals plan bombings by day and celebrate black masses by night. Every nation has its own secret service, perpetrating forgeries, plots, and massacres. Conspiracies rule history. The unification of Italy to the Paris Commune, to the Dreyfus Affair, to the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Europe is in tumult and everyone needs a scapegoat. But what if, behind all these conspiracies, both real and imagined, lay one lone man? What if that evil genius created the world's most infamous document? Umberto Eco takes his readers on a remarkable journey through the underbelly of world-shattering events. Here is Echo at his most exciting, a book immediately hailed as a masterpiece. I'm definitely intrigued by the all the conspiracies going on. I mean, conspiracy theories are becoming very popular nowadays. So perhaps they always have been popular. But it'll be interesting to read in some novels about conspiracy theories. I know that one of my favorite novelists, Thomas Pynchon, writes a lot about paranoia and conspiracy, and I really love his novels. So maybe there'll be a bit of Pynchon vibes in Echo's work. It seems to also be steeped in mysticism, which I find interesting. So it's definitely going to be an exciting read from what I've heard. And I'm very eager to go through some of Echo's work, and hopefully I find another favorite novelist of mine. Almost done with the book haul now. So here we have a book by a man who wrote one of my favorite novels of all time. This is a Library of America edition of from the Herman Melville collection. In this book, it has Taipi, Umu, and Mardi. So those are three books that kind of nowadays you only hear about Moby Dick. You only really read Moby Dick and maybe some of his novellas or short stories like Bartleby the Scrivener or Billy Budd. But these are three adventure novels, I believe, that Melville wrote. He was well-traveled through Polynesia and all those areas. And these are the, I guess, semi-fictionalized accounts of his experiences in the islands. And they're considered great adventure and travel novels. In fact, Taipi was actually the most famous and successful novel while Melville was alive. Moby Dick didn't get as much acclaim or many people reading it while he was alive. It wasn't until he passed away that it became regarded as, a great American novel. So it's been about a year since I read Moby Dick, but it's still easily one of my favorite novels of all time. It's at least top 10 and possibly top 5. I've also read Billy Budd, but that's really the extent of my reading of Melville. So I know that reading a few of his other novels is definitely something I need to do. So I was very pleased to find these three novels, and I do have another Library of America edition. And I really love what they're doing. They're making these nice hardcover versions, very well made, acid-free paper, and they're making them for very reasonable prices. But when you can find them at a book sale for $3, I mean, it's very hard to pass up. And the final novel of this book haul, this is a big boy. This is this is a pretty big book. It's, from what I've heard, very complex. It is a historical fiction. It covers World War II and happenings within Nazi Russia, as well as the Soviet Union, who were communist. So you get both sides of the extremism there. This author is prolific. I mean, he's written tons of novels, tons of nonfiction. He's really one of the most interesting authors as to his story and how he writes and how he undertakes his research. So this is Europe Central by William T. Balman. So I have heard a lot about William Balman. He is definitely well respected within the literary community. He is known as one of the most dedicated, I'd say, writers out there right now. He kind of almost seems to have a cult following. He's published a ton of works. One is Rising Up and Rising Down, a 7-volume set, which is very limited run, and they go for thousands of dollars for a set on the internet. So, I mean, this guy definitely has a rabid fan base, a very dedicated fan base, and I've heard that there's good reason why. So I've never read him before, but I'm very excited to read this. I've heard nothing but good things about it. Let's read a bit on the back. In this magnificent work of fiction, acclaimed author William T. Balman turns his trenchant eye on the authoritarian cultures of Germany and the USSR in the 20th century to render a mesmerizing perspective on human experience during wartime. Through interwoven narratives that paint a composite portrait of these two battling leviathans and the monstrous age they defined, Europe Central captures a chorus of voices, both real and fictional: a young German who joins the SS to fight its crimes, two generals who collaborate with the enemy for different reasons, the Soviet composer Dmitri Shostakovich, and the Stalinist assaults upon his work and life. With these and other unforgettable stories, Balman breathes life into a haunting chapter from the past and gives us a daring literary masterpiece. So that is a synopsis of Europe Central. I really think it's interesting because from what I've heard, it also has a fictionalized account of the woman who shot Vladimir Lenin, as well as his wife, accounts of his wife. Like I said, it covers the two forces within Germany and the Soviet Union. And it seems like he's very fixated on Dmitri Shostakovich, who was a very good composer, a classical musician. His works are very good. I recommend you go give them a listen. He was definitely a great. So it's definitely kind of all over the place, a bit out there. It seems like the pieces are kind of loosely connected, but there's tons of different plots. So it's kind of reminds me of like maybe a more modern Gravity's Rainbow is what it kind of seems like it's going towards, and I absolutely love Gravity's Rainbow. So I'm hoping that I love this one just as much. So that's Europe Central by William T. Balman. So if you stuck around, thank you for watching. So this covers the second part of my book haul. So this was the Saturday, and then I had already posted a video in part one. I covered the Sunday. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. I don't know how many book hauls I'm going to be doing. It's not often that I buy this many books at one time. So I might go to a book haul, and I might go to a library sale in May. So that might be when the next video of this sort comes out. Cumberland County Library is potentially having a book sale in May, so I probably will go if they do that, as I enjoyed the last one. I might actually make a video on the first book haul back in February when I went to, if I can get all those sorted out, I might make a book haul on that. I'm not really sure yet. But from now on, I'm probably going to be posting a lot of reviews of books I read. As I said in the last video, Train Spotting is probably the next video I'm going to put up, a review of that book. So if you're into literary discussions and nonfiction, and I might probably be making a few lists of my current favorite books. If that interests you, please subscribe, stick around, leave a comment, give me recommendations. I just love to foster a community of just loving literature and loving books and loving everything that these great writers have offered us. I do consider it a virtue to be well-read. Like, personally, it's definitely a goal of mine to cultivate a big library, to be well-read. I don't think that reading makes you smart or knowledgeable, but it definitely, as in, like, just because someone doesn't read or doesn't enjoy reading, that doesn't mean that person is stupid. That doesn't mean that person is not wise or knowledgeable. You can definitely be, knowledgeable or smart without being a bookworm. But reading does absolutely nothing to harm your knowledge or your view of the world. So I definitely consider reading and being well-read to be a virtue, and it's something that I constantly strive towards. So that's part of the reason that I love collecting books. I love going to sales like this and stocking up on as many different types of information as I can get my hands on. And novels, I mean, it's just such a pure form of entertainment. It's such a creative form of entertainment. It's a great exercise for your mind to read a great novel, especially one that challenges you. Every now and then I love reading novels that are kind of straightforward, that aren't challenging. Like, I love Tom Clancy. And Tom Clancy, he has some novels that are challenging, but like Patriot Games, for example. It's just a straightforward action story, basically. And I love being able to read it like that. But I also love reading like a Gravity's Rainbow or a Ulysses or a Moby Dick, those books that really challenge you to think, that challenge you to examine what's happening, the underlying ideas of the story. So I think that there's very many reasons to read, and I have a lot of motivations for reading. It's not just for knowledge, it's for entertainment as well. And although it does get your mind working, and it's a very healthy form of entertainment. I mean, I love playing video games, but I mean, reading is definitely, I believe, better for your mind than, playing Xbox or PC or something like that. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Leave a comment. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you later.